Welcome to this tip and trick, and the purpose of this one is to tell everybody a little bit more about some of the assembly constraint options and tools that we have directly inside of Inventor. We've all worked with assembly constraints, and we know that obviously by adding assembly constraints, what we can do is we can limit the degree of freedom within inside of the constraint. However, often, and I often get asked this too, is that how best would it be to try and control things like this? Because I'm sure we've all worked before where things got a little bit out of hand and it's not been that easy to control an assembly constraint. But just keep in mind with Inventor that we do in actual fact have quite a few nice tools, okay, that you can work with. So for example, if I have a look at my LCD monitor mounting bracket that I've got here, you can see here that I can obviously move my mounting bracket and it can swivel along this hinge quite easily. One of the problems with this type of thing is that obviously I've got not really any control here. Yes, we can use interference checking and do things like contact sets to actually define actual movement inside of here, but you might find inside of your assembly you might want to be able to control this so that it would only move a certain amount of degrees. And this is where some of the assembly constraint tools can come in really handy. You'll notice that under the place constraint dialog box there is in actual fact a little double chevron here that in actual fact expands the dialog box out to give you a few more options, such as the limits of movement that you could have within a certain constraint. So in my example here, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to quickly insert just a standard static constraint between these two faces just so I can show you how this will work. So I've put in the normal static type of constraint, and we all know by putting that in I've now limited its degree of freedom, and we now know that it can't move at all. However, if you do want it to maybe have a certain amount of movement, what you can do here is that you can have the constraint have that minimum and maximum value that it can of course move by. So for example, what I could do here is I could specify within my constraints here that this could be able to move by a minimum of 45 degrees and a maximum of 135. So you can see here that even though I've still got the same constraint in my browser here, I do have a plus and a minus option where it can move to a minimum and a maximum type of effect. So you can see that even clearer here if I have a look at it from my top view. So I can see again your 45-degree angle right up to a 35, but it can't move any more than that. Another additional thing that is available on this constraint, these minimum maximum constraints that we've got here, is that you can also specify what we call a resting position. So if you use the resting position, and in my case I'll use the 90-degree angle here, you can see here that even though I can now drag my constraint to wherever I want it to be, anytime I let it go, it'll always pop back to its resting position, and I'll be able to control it a lot easier rather than having to just keep trying to move it around all the time while I'm busy working with it. So you can see here that a lot of these constraints can be in actual fact controlled directly here using some of the assembly constraint tools. These tools just work like any other ones, and of course can be driven as well. So I could say, for example, specify how many times I'd like to drag this or get it to move, and I can of course drive the constraint directly here inside of Inventor as I would normally. So there you go, there's some great tools here inside of Inventor and the constraints in order to be able to drive your minimum and maximum type of constraint. So there's a great tip here from Midas. Thanks very much.